Hello, my name is Rachel Ridge and I'm part of OPSAF, which is the Orland Park Substance Abuse Forum. And today I'm interviewing Danielle and we're going to be talking about the dangers of prescription drug use. And when I say dangers of prescription drug use, there's really three classes of medications that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about Lexapro, which would be an antidepressant or something like that, but I'm talking specifically about opiates or painkillers. We're going to talk about depressants or benzodiazepines, and we're also going to talk about stimulant medications. The reason you need to really be cautious with these three classes of medications is because they're all highly addictive. They all can be used and are worthwhile medications, but you really need to be aware of, are they necessary, and when you're on them, the duration that you're on them, and to have some accountability because they are by nature very addictive. So let's talk about stimulant medications. So the stimulant medications are those Adderall, Concerta, Vyvanse, Ritalin. Those are prescribed typically for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And if you have ADHD, they are legitimate drugs that can really help somebody. However, what's happening in today's world is that many kids, in particular adolescents, are abusing stimulants. They figured out that you can use them to pull all-nighters, to study, because they feel like they're under a lot of pressure between homework and grades and sports. So sometimes kids are resorting to these meds in order to feel like they can just stay ahead. In fact, the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids just did a recent documentary called Breaking Points, which is specifically addressing the stimulant abuse problem. And on there, they're interviewing numerous kids that one girl said it's like running a race and everybody has motors on their shoes except you. So she said she felt like it was the either cheat or be cheated kind of world that they're set up to be in. So stimulants are highly abused. And even on the Today Show this week, they did a documentary also talking about what they call academic doping. So kids will use them for various reasons, to lose weight, energy, to pull all-nighters, like I said. The other class of medications that you want to be aware of are the depressants or the benzodiazepines. So benzodiazepines are the Ativan, Valium, Klonopin, Xanax. Those are, again, all highly addictive. And they're normally prescribed if you're highly anxious or if you're having trouble sleeping. And again, they can be legitimately used. However, they're highly abused. Many people deal with anxiety. And the thing with Ativan and Xanax and some of these heavy-duty benzodiazepines is that they're very addictive, and that particularly with kids, sometimes kids don't know that you shouldn't be popping these pills and drinking alcohol. That can really be dangerous and a deadly cocktail because they're both central nervous system depressants, and sometimes kids just don't know what they're mixing. And then the third class of drugs that you should be aware of is the opiates or the painkillers. That's the Vicodin, OxyContin, Percocet, Norcos. Those are obviously, again, legitimate drugs when you have a chronic pain problem or when you're in severe pain. However, people are getting prescribed opiates for getting wisdom teeth pulled or for a sprained ankle. And that's probably not where you need an opiate because, again, they're highly addictive. And what a lot of people don't realize, too, is, you hear all about the heroin epidemic. Most people are unaware of the reason we have this heroin epidemic is because we had an epidemic, particularly with the opiates that have been prescribed in the United States. I think the figure is something like the United States makes up 5% of the world population, and yet we consume 80% of the prescribed opiates on the market. That's a big problem. And most people do not start a heroin addiction, shooting up. They start with a prescription pill, a Norco, a Percocet, a Vicodin. So you really want to be aware of some of these prescription medications and the dangers. And again, I can't emphasize enough because for the parent out there or for the person out there who is taking one of these medications that I talked about, please hear me. I'm not saying they don't have a place. They do have a place, but you need to be aware and be cautious, and I would recommend that you question your doctors. Is there another alternative besides going to a heavy-duty drug that's really very addictive? Because a lot of times there are alternatives that aren't addictive. And also, we live in a quick fix society. We want to feel better now. And we're not so comfortable with suffering or feeling any type of uncomfortableness. And that's a dangerous place to be too as a society, because life is uncomfortable. And I see it again and again where so many kids are just looking for quick fixes. And they don't have any resilience really in them or any coping skills other than I need a pill. And medication is one leg of the stool in counseling. It has its place, but there's other legs of that stool that need to be in conjunction with it. Counseling is huge. Exercise is huge. Spirituality or faith-based things, hobbies, those are all huge components of what help us have well-being and psychological health. I'm here today to interview Danielle, and she's going to talk to us about her journey with prescription pills and what it led to in her own life. So welcome, Danielle.
Thank you.
So Danielle, can you tell us a little bit about, I know you've been sitting here alongside of me and heard me talk about the dangers of prescription drugs. And really for me, it's twofold. I think particularly with some prescribed drugs, particularly with opiates or the painkillers, lots of times a legitimate accident or injury happens or a diagnosis is made and there's pain involved, and people get hooked on these accidentally. They weren't looking to get hooked on these. They legitimately had a prescription for a diagnosis of pain. So I think that's one category, but I think another category of people are people that know that prescription drugs can get you high, and they will specifically go and seek out doctors or doctor shop or lie about symptoms that they don't have in order to get drugs so that they can use them inappropriately. So I think there's two different classes here. So what was your experience like with prescription drugs?
Well, I had both of those. When I first started out, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, and I did not ever really, maybe a few times in my life, have ever taken a pain medication or needed a pain medication. So when I was in this horrific pain and basically bedridden, I found something that would take my pain away, and I did have a legitimate reason, and I was prescribed these by the doctor. But what took place after that, after I had gotten hooked on these pills, was what Rachel had talked about, doctor shopping and maybe not realizing that I wasn't in that much pain because of what the opiates did to me, just basically telling me I was in pain all the time and I had no pain tolerance. And then eventually leading to taking other pills. I had went through a detox and started seeing a psychiatrist, and when I started telling him I wasn't sleeping and I felt depressed and I was anxious all the time, well, that was really me coming off of these opiates, which is a horrible feeling and kind of turns your world upside down, and it is a long time before you're able to sleep on your own and not feel anxious and sort of live life again. But instead I was prescribed Valium and sleeping pills and these different things. And then I just started a whole new venture onto, getting off of these pills now. So, in the beginning, I really was ignorant to what I was doing and taking. But as time went on and my addiction really progressed, I knew exactly what to do and who to see and what to say to get what I needed at that time.
Right, and I think that's what's so important. I think what breaks my heart, just as being a counselor and being in the addiction field for so many years, is that so many people don't know about the dangers. And I think we're taught as a society, you don't feel well, you go to a doctor and you trust your doctor. And there's a lot of good doctors out there, but I think sometimes the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. And I've seen people, I've had numerous patients tell me, I Googled the symptoms of what I would need to say, how many ADHD symptoms I would need to rattle off before I could get prescribed what I wanted, or with sleeping or anxiety symptoms. And so I think for me, it's really just to empower the public to, one, be aware of the dangers of prescription drugs. I think drug trends change. When I was growing up, no one in high school was really taking prescription pills. Alcohol and pot have been around since the beginning of time. But today's world, you really need to know what your kids are up against. And adolescents following marijuana, prescription drugs are the number one illicit drug that kids are using today. And if you don't know that, if you don't know what your kids are facing, what their temptations are, what their stresses are, what they're turning to today, you really need to be on top of that so you can talk to your kids. Because one of the biggest misperceptions out there about prescription drugs is that they're safer than street drugs. And that is an absolute myth. In fact, I was recently at a Stairway to Heroin event the other night, and an ER doctor who is actually in recovery and has been an ER doctor for 16 years, he used this equation. He said POP equals heroin. And he said prescription opiate pills equal heroin. He was addressing the audience of parents, because this was at a high school event, and he said, how many of us have had a knee surgery or an elbow surgery, and we were prescribed pain pills, whether it's Vicodin, OxyContin, Norco, and we didn't finish them, and we just left them sitting around. He said, would you leave heroin just sitting around in a baggie in your house? Absolutely not, because we immediately sense heroin and cocaine. These are dangerous substances, but we don't sense that prescription drugs carry the same weight. And this doctor went on to say that the prescription opiate pills almost have the same makeup of heroin. So when they're ingested, they're doing almost the same thing internally in your body. And that's what's so dangerous, again. And so I just want parents to be aware that they have choices. I want parents to be aware that they can question doctors, particularly when we're talking about an addictive prescription. Not all prescriptions are addictive, but when we're talking about stimulants, when we're talking about benzodiazepines or depressants, or when we're talking about opiates or painkillers, you really want to kind of have that red flag go off. Is this addictive? How long do they need to be on it? And if they do need to be on it, make sure that you're monitoring it, that you know how many pills are in that bottle, that you're holding that bottle of pills for somebody, just for accountability. Because again, the majority of what we found out about kids abusing prescription drugs is they're coming right out of their own medicine cabinets at home, whether it's their parents' medicine cabinets or their grandparents' medication cabinets. They just have access to them because they're sitting around. So you really want to be aware of that. Danielle, is there anything else you can think about?
I think that there's almost two dangers with prescription drugs that I have seen. The first being that, like Rachel said, that they're prescribed, they're safe. My doctor gave them to me. I'm going to trust my doctor. And that if I take it responsibly, I don't have a problem. That is the first sort of dangerous thing that happens, because that is true when you take it for a short amount of time, but most of the time, and not all the time, like Rachel said, there are legitimate reasons people need these meds. But with an opiate, they are highly addictive. There's a short amount of time before your body becomes dependent on it. So even if you're taking it responsibly for a long period of time, you still can get hooked on it. And the other thing is, even though they're prescribed and they could be monitored by your doctor, especially when a young person takes it or somebody who has already kind of crossed that line into addiction, you're not taking one pill, you're not taking two pills. I know with my experience, I was already addicted to pain medication and I was taking way beyond what was prescribed to me. And now I'm getting these new pills, the Valium and the sleeping pills, and I'm used to overdoing everything. I'm an addict. And so I'm, maybe taking a handful of the pills, 3 or 4 when I'm supposed to take 1 a day, I'm taking 5 a day. And just the danger in that, obviously for overdose, but just kind of what that does to your mental state when you're taking those benzodiazepines. Like it's a whole nother beast from the opiates, the mental state of it, what it did to me on that, just brought me to another level and just opened up a new door now that I didn't have to deal with before. I was already having the issues with the opiates, and now I have this new one. And it kind of opened up a door to almost taking anything, where my guard was down, and my thought process wasn't my own anymore. And so it didn't seem so bad to maybe try cocaine or to take a pill of ecstasy when I was out. I was in my early 20s, I was still going out, and that just the thought where a normal person without an addiction problem would, maybe think, I shouldn't do this, or that's dangerous. I'm already under the influence, and I've already crossed this line and this line, and now I've opened up the door to something else. So,
and I want to touch on too, Danielle, because you mentioned it, but I think too, a lot of people, there's a disconnect between the heroin epidemic that we are in right now and the prescription opiate medications that are prescribed. And sometimes people don't link those together. And I believe you even said yourself that, I said it, that it normally doesn't start right at heroin. It normally starts with prescription pain pills because they're seen as safer, they're benign, et cetera, et cetera. And I believe that's how you said your journey started too. So can you just tell us how that journey from prescription pain pills led to heroin?
Sure. I actually had most of my addiction was from prescription pain pills, and like I said, pretty much any pill. And then toward the end of my addiction, doctors, and I couldn't get what I needed at that time. It was harder to doctor shop, and people sort of were on to me, so it was a little bit more difficult. And I was taking such a high amount of the pills that it was just hard to keep feeding my addiction what my body needed and wanted. And I had actually run into a friend who also had an addiction problem, and they offered me heroin. They said it would take away my withdrawal symptoms. And I can't really ever describe to anyone who hasn't gone through it what withdrawal symptoms feel like, but it is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And so, like I said before, my wall was down. I didn't really care at that time. All I could think about was taking that feeling away. So, and just like I said before, I had already been in my addiction for a while and done things that I never thought I would do, tried drugs that I never thought I would. So it didn't really seem like that big of a deal to me to take the heroin. And it really gave the same effect, like Rachel said. There's no difference. It felt the same, and it supplied the need that I had at that time. So
yeah. And I think, like I said, a lot of people, I think so many people probably never play that tape all the way through. No one takes a prescription pill and thinks, oh, this could lead to a horrific addiction. I don't think anybody ever thinks that. And that's why I think it's so important that we do educational videos like this, just so that the public is empowered and so that you know what to be aware of. And again, I'm not saying that these medications are in and of themselves bad. If you're in a horrific car accident, or if you're, dying of cancer or something, you're going to need some heavy-duty pain pills. But the problem is they've been so overprescribed, and people have learned that you can get high off of them and you can abuse them. And that's really what we're talking about today. And we really just want to encourage you to be aware of those three classes of medications. Like I said, the stimulants, the depressants or the benzodiazepines, and then the pain pills or the opiates. Know that there's alternatives to all of those. Know that because by nature they're highly addictive, think about short-term use and accountability if you have to be on any of those things. Danielle, you even mentioned that when you were on the pain pills for so long, you became hypersensitive to pain. That is legitimately true. It's called hyperanesthesia. That's a medical term. I may not have pronounced it exactly right. But the longer you're on opiate pain pills, the more sensitive to pain you become. I mean, think about that. How crazy is that? You're taking pills so that you're not in pain, but you're causing your body to become more sensitive to pain. And being a counselor on a 28-day addiction unit for years, I actually saw people that thought there was no way they could live without these pills because their pain was so intense. They just didn't believe it. But they had reached such a sensitive point in their pain level that when they were medically stabilized and detoxed from all these drugs, they couldn't believe it. They couldn't believe that their pain was different. So just know that there are some dangerous potentials to these drugs. There are alternatives to these drugs. And if you do need to use these drugs, make sure you're having the conversations with your doctor about how long, accountability with the pills, and make sure it's not the only leg on the stool that you're using. Like I said, whether it's depression or sleep, there's lots of things you can do. Pain, there's lots of alternatives you can do. And particularly once you've crossed the line into addiction, medication has a place, but be aware of addictive medications, and also be aware of you need to be in counseling, you need support groups, you need exercise, you need hobbies, you need all of those legs on the stool to really have a fulfilling recovery and to be emotionally healthy. So something to think about as a parent with this prescription drug increase that we're seeing, particularly among adolescents, I really want to encourage parents to take a look at your own life. And when I say that, I mean, what is your relationship like with drinking and drugs or even prescription pills? Because the reality is that values are caught more than they're taught. And I'm not here to condemn anybody. Believe me, I'm not. I'm just here to maybe challenge you to ask yourself, what is my relationship like with alcohol? Do all of our family parties have alcohol involved? Do I come home every night and have to have 2-3 glasses of wine to de-stress? What are the coping mechanisms or my stress relievers that are healthy that I'm modeling to my kids? Because I can't tell you how many, whether it's young people or young adults that I've worked with that have addiction problems that say, well, my parents do it, or my mom's the one who said, try a Xanax, see if this helps. And again, I think we just have to be aware of what our relationship is with drugs and alcohol and prescription pills, what message we're sending our kids, and just be able to have those conversations where we can provide our kids with other alternatives besides medications. Because the reality is kids are under stress today. There's a lot going on today for kids between school and grades and social media and, my appearance and all that stuff. There's a lot of pressure on kids, but we want to make sure we're modeling healthy coping skills. Because again, kids will do as we do oftentimes. And a lot of times we say, don't do this, but yet we do a different thing. And so I just encourage you to, maybe do a self-check in what your relationship is like in your family of drugs and alcohol. And what are the expectations too? I really think you have to have that talk even more so with your kids. What are the expectations of drug and alcohol use? And again, to know what the temptations are with your kids today. It's not just alcohol and it's not just marijuana. The prescription pills are out there. Heroin is out there. And I know that's a scary word to sometimes even want to bring up at the dinner table, but it needs to be brought up. It needs to be talked about. We can no longer live in the dark about these issues. I mean, Danielle is the perfect example of, it can happen to anybody. And it's alive and well in the suburbs. And we want to make sure our kids are equipped so that they can make the right choices and that they can choose healthy coping mechanisms. If you have any other questions or input, I encourage you to visit our website, which is www.opcares.net. It's a great website with lots of resources on there and videos and all kinds of information for you. Thanks.